As we mark Youth Day today, let's continue a big focus as well on the mental health of young people. Most mental health disorders begin to manifest before the age of 18. It's a critical time in any young person's life. So we've had COVID-19, we've had school closures, economic hardships that young people are feeling at the moment, feeling even more isolated than ever before. But there is some help with only about 15 child and adolescent psychiatrists in the public sector. Where do you find that help? Well, SADAG, South African Depression and Anxiety Group, holding a webinar a little while ago to discuss some of these issues. Clinical Psychologist Chris Kemp was on that panel, one of the speakers, joining us now. Hello to you, Chris. Good to have you on eNCA. As the kids would say these days, it's rough on these streets. How do we begin to support the youngsters when, let's be fair, you and I didn't grow up with a lot of these issues, did we?
No, and that's exactly what we were discussing on the panel quite largely as well, was the fact that kids feel the stress of the home environment. And so adults, parents are under so much economic stress with the current climate that a lot of that is felt for the teenagers at home as well. And they feel that very deeply. They're very aware of that. And I think teenagers these days in general are much more socially and politically aware than we probably were when we were teens. So there's certainly a huge amount of stress and pressure filtering down through those systems as well.
It wouldn't be fair to pass the blame onto the parents. You can't hold parents accountable for what they're going through at the moment either. But I did speak to Professor Kleinchies from UCT, with Intellectual Disability Psychiatric Division, saying that it is still up to the parents, though, to try and put on a brave face. But it's difficult at the moment, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think that's the thing, is that as in spite of what parents may be doing their best to do, I think that teenagers are just very aware. They're very sensitive to that. And like you say, parents can only carry so much. One of the big things that we want to emphasize is sort of the normalization of these struggles, that a lot of people are going through this, and the more that we can encourage teens and parents even to sort of talk about it a little bit more and normalize it as something that we can discuss, it makes it a lot easier for those who are struggling to sort of reach out for support and for help.
We don't do that very well, though, do we? We can't ask for help because we don't think we've got a problem. So how does someone do that? If they think they may have a problem, what do they do? What are we looking for?
I think, I always say to people, don't put too much pressure on yourself to know how to resolve the problem. Just the first step is just talking about it and being able to say, especially if you're a teenager, being able to say to your parents, hey, I think I'm struggling. I think that I'm not okay. I think oftentimes people anticipate the question of why. And sometimes we can't answer that. We don't know why exactly we're feeling this way. It's a lot of things, and we can't. So everyone thinks, well, if I tell my mom or my dad I'm struggling, the first thing they're going to ask is why, and I don't know what to tell them. So I often encourage parents and teens to focus more on what. Just start with what you're feeling rather than having to explain why you feel that way. We can get to that. But really the first thing is coming out there and talking about it to a friend, a family member, anyone really.
This webinar that was held by SADAG a couple of nights ago, let's talk about that. Has it already been hosted, or is it still going to take place? No, I think it's been hosted as well, hasn't it? What's the one thing that stood out for you? Is it unemployment? We're focusing on youth unemployment, but is that really what the youth are worried about?
I would say that the youth are very much worried about future employment. I mean, I've seen a lot more academic pressure on the youth, and I think that filters down from parents as well. The more things become economically strained in terms of employment opportunity, the more parents obviously want their kids to succeed. And so they're saying, hey, you need to get these marks up, you need to do better in school. And kids are definitely feeling that. There's this perception that if you don't do well in school, your life is going to be ruined. And I often find myself having to contain teens and say, hey guys, it's okay. There's a lot of avenues here, and if something goes badly, there's always room to fix it, to repeat it. It's not going to be the end of the world, but for them it very much feels that way. So I would certainly say that economic stress that are felt by the parents filters down to the teens as well, and there's just a huge amount of pressure and not a lot of opportunity for them to socialize, to develop their identities, which is such an important part of this age, and the more they become occupied by academic pressures and demands, the less time they have for doing teenage things. And teenage things are actually quite important in terms of our emotional and psychological development.
And I'm going to say thank you for the moment, Chris Kemp, clinical psychologist, joining us as we look at the mental health, the mental state of youth today. Are they